How does someone become a doctor? What is the road that leads there? That's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm mostly going to kind of share my path to where I am now, my decision making, why I wanted to do this. Am I glad that I'm here? Do I regret doing this? The pitfalls, the benefits, the disadvantages. So let's go. So right off the bat, I am not one of those people that wanted to be a doctor when they were age 5 or whatever. I never even thought about it. Being in medicine was not something that really crossed my mind. I didn't have any like medical influences a whole lot. My dad was a lawyer. He was a criminal defense mostly, and then my mother was a high school teacher. She's retired now. She taught high school and also did interior design. And my older sister is a nurse and still is a nurse. No one else really in medicine. But those are, not a lot of medical influences that really swayed me one way or the other. And in, elementary school, junior high, I was not a very good student. Well, I mean, maybe I was, but in junior high, I really didn't know what I was doing a whole lot, and I ditched class a lot, and fell asleep in class a lot, and I failed math. I failed algebra. I had no idea what I was doing in algebra. And I also didn't care. I was like disconnected with I remember looking at my in ninth grade, looking at my report card that said I had an F in algebra, and I was like, whoa, okay, interesting. And I just kind of shrugged it off. Now, that's not to say I didn't enjoy school and I didn't enjoy particular topics. I loved science. I loved biology. And I think I did in junior high, I did well in biology and maybe physical sciences or something like that. And I liked English. So I wasn't I wasn't like a terrible student, but there were some things I was just they didn't click with me. Math particularly did not click with me. And then when I got in high school, I had a terrible GPA in junior high. And then your GPA resets in high school once you get into high school. And for some reason, I saw that as an opportunity to start fresh. And then I actually tried to get good grades in high school. So I did care about going to classes and stuff. Now, I wasn't a typical student. Me and my particular group of friends, we got into trouble every so often. And I don't think I'll go in much more detail than that. But yeah, anyway, we were kind of a unique group of friends. I love writing. That's what I wanted to do when I was in high school. I wanted to write. I did English. I did AP English. I did creative writing with an amazing teacher that I'll never forget, that I'm still in contact with. And I loved poetry, and I loved literature. I loved English literature. Just fell in love with it. Fell in love with sci-fi, with Isaac Asimov. One of my favorite books was Of Human Bondage by W. Somerset Maugham. I loved Shakespeare. Anyway, so I really enjoyed those things. And I was like, I think I wanted to be a writer. Although, again, I wasn't really thinking about my future a whole lot. But, and I was on the literary magazine staff. Every year we collected poetry and all that stuff from the school and from our own writings and published a literary magazine. So I loved that. And I loved that group of friends. And again, that teacher I had was extremely influential. One day in that class, we had the poet laureate of the state come, and it was great. He spent an hour with us talking. It was fantastic. And someone asked him about having a career in writing, and I will never forget what he said. He said, "Do you think I get paid to be the poet laureate?" And then he really, after that, he basically more or less encouraged the class to just keep writing as a hobby on the side and to maybe not make it your career because it can be kind of a hard life. And I actually took that advice and decided not to pursue writing in a formal way. My love of writing is never gone, and I actually still write, and I write novels. And it's something that I enjoy immensely. That's another topic we can talk about another time. But I definitely took that to heart. So at any rate, and then I had a teacher in high school who completely turned math around for me, completely changed algebra. Because I was always a year behind in math because I failed it in junior high. So I was always a year behind, not really, kind of struggling. But this teacher, there's something about the way she taught. Boom, algebra finally clicked with me. I was like, oh, this is easy, and I totally aced it. And then by the end of my high school years, I also took some AP classes because I really enjoy, and biology, and I really found out that I enjoyed chemistry. So I decided to go to college and to pursue science, some sort of degree in science. So off I went. So in college, I took some, prelim like science courses and stuff, and I was almost positive I wanted to do chemistry, do a major in chemistry, which I ultimately did. And I loved chemistry. It just something about chemistry just clicked in my brain. And then because I had that amazing high school teacher who taught me how to do math, I actually excelled in math. I took calculus 1, 2, 3. I took physics. I took quantum mechanics. I took thermodynamics. I took all these courses, and I wouldn't have if it weren't for that teacher. Now, I have reached out to that teacher since then. I have emailed her, and I told her recently, just a few years ago I did, and I said, look, I would not be a doctor if it weren't for you. And we had a good correspondence, and so I was really grateful for her. You know what was sad, though? She seemed so burnt out from teaching when we were... Anyway, that's a whole other topic. Teachers, the sacrifice that they do, and it's a pretty thankless job. Anyway, so... I loved college, and I studied a lot. And, I was fortunate enough to grow up in, middle class. My parents, they're not wealthy by any means, but, we weren't impoverished. And my dad and mom were able to help me with college tuition. I paid a little college tuition also, kind of paid a little bit. So, I wouldn't have been able to do these things if I weren't born into an elevated station to begin with, right? So, I was fortunate. I was fortunate to be in those circumstances, to even go have an education, right? And that underlines everything that I'm saying today. That if I were the exact same person, born with a different color skin, and born in different circumstances, would I be a doctor today? The chances are way, way significantly less. And that is not just speculation. You look at the cold hard numbers of who are doctors, right? Statistically, who becomes a doctor, and it's people that are born at least with those resources, and you're more likely to succeed in the United States if you're white, and that's a fact. It's really doesn't need to be debated. People can debate that all they want, but all you have to do is just look at the statistics. Anyway, so I loved college, and I did well. I got good grades in college, and I was dedicated and a good student, all that. I didn't know so. Did I want to go into medical school at that time? I thought about it, but it wasn't like, yes, I'm going to do this. I considered doing like a PhD in chemistry, or maybe biology. And I had a lot of other interests too in the arts. I loved art history, and I loved music. Not that I ever really wanted to take because I played instruments as well. But anyway. But I did decide. I was like, yeah, I should probably try to do med school. I kind of in my junior year, I was like, yeah, I'll go for it, because basically the defining thing for me was, do I want to work in a lab or do I want to work with people? And I was like, I want to work with people. I think I don't want to work in a lab the rest of my life. So I decided to do med school. Then I took I took the MCAT. And I was like, you know what? I studied for it, of course, but I didn't take like a prep course or anything. I was like, hopefully I'll do okay. And I applied, and I took the MCAT. My score was very average. When I first took the MCAT, and I had pretty good grades, and I did community service. You have to do community service, and you have to have some sort of research. Although I didn't have much, you have to be a well-rounded applicant. So I applied to med school, and I got exactly one interview in the state that I live, and I did not get into medical school. So, and I was like, well, of course that was disappointing, but I wasn't like devastated. I was like, okay. And I kind of considered my first try like a dry run, because I know you have to apply more than once. If you really are dedicated to becoming a doctor, you have to plan to apply once, twice, or even 3 times if you're really dedicated. And also, you have to just admit to yourself, I may not get into medical school. You have to be okay with that possibility. You can't be like, I am destined for med school, because you are setting yourself up. Nobody is guaranteed to go to med school. Nobody. And I've mentioned on my TikTok before, it's a crapshoot getting med school. It's a numbers game. You could be extremely well qualified. Let me not say well qualified. You can have extremely good grades and extremely good MCAT score and still not get into med school. I've seen it. And then you can have subpar grades, subpar, MCAT score and get into med school. I've seen that many times. The fact is that getting good grades and things, they correlate with being a good doctor, but they don't make a good doctor. These things do not make a good doctor. To make a good doctor is a well-rounded person that has good communication skills, that knows how to talk with people, that knows how to work in a team, that's collaborative, not egotistical, is not so rigid thinking. Rigid thinking is not a good doctor. You must be flexible. You have to be open to possibilities. You have to be curious, and intellectually curious, not just intellectual, but curious about things, not being satisfied. These are qualities that make a good doctor. And not all doctors need to be like that either to be successful as well. So anyway, I was like, you know what? I will try to apply again to medical school. I had no idea what kind of doctor I wanted to be, by the way. I had no idea because you can't know. You can't know because you're not exposed enough to medicine. If you're like an undergraduate listening to this, it's okay. You cannot know what you want to do because you're not exposed enough. Yeah, you can go shadow a physician, which I did, a pediatrician, and I think I've shadowed a plastic surgeon and a neurosurgeon. But it is such an opaque, mysterious world. If you're not a part of it, you have no idea what you want to do. So I had no idea. I definitely did not think about anesthesiology and critical care. I barely even knew anesthesiology was even a thing when I was in college. Anyway, so when I was a senior, I then took the MCAT again. I took a prep course to really prepare for it. Again, resources, right? That was expensive. Like to take a prep course. I think my dad paid for it, or I did, or we split it up or something because I worked also throughout college. Anyway, and then I improved my score quite a bit. It wasn't like a brilliant score, but it was a decent score. It was a score I was proud of. And again, I had a pretty good GPA, and I think I did some more research and some other. I rounded out my application a little bit more, got a little more interviews, and I will say, and then I got that year I got some rejections, and I was like, and I still hadn't heard back from other schools, and I was like, you know what, I guess it's okay, I won't get into med school. And it was February of my final year of college that I'll never forget. I was in the library at my college. There was an email from a school I'd interviewed at. I opened it up. The first word was congratulations. That was a good day. That was a good day. I was very, very happy. I still remember that feeling. That was a great feeling. So, I got accepted to med school, and it was awesome. It was great. It's, celebrating and all those things that, proud parents, and it was great. I went to a medical school in a different state that I was born and raised in, and it was hard to say goodbye and move away and, going away party and all that stuff, and still have really good, kind of bittersweet memories of that. Anyway, so I moved and I started med school, and I definitely enjoyed the first 2 years of med school. So just kind of getting into more of the details of what is medical education now. The first 2 years of med school are all books and lectures. You don't do clinical rotations. Those are your second 2 years. Now, I really enjoy the first 2 years of med school a lot because you don't typically work in med school because you need to study and you need to go to class. And I took out loans. I took out full loans. After this point, my parents could not afford to pay for anything. I think maybe they paid for my car insurance, but I took out loans for living, for rent, and all those things. Loans I still have right now that I'm still paying off. And I took out maximum loans. I had to. It's a law, and so I basically have it's a mortgage that you're taking out, which was fine. I'm grateful to be in med school. So happy to be there, and I enjoyed those first 2 years quite a bit. And honestly, I found it easier than college, speaking relatively, because when you're a med student, all you're doing is being a med student. But when you're in college, you're working. You're taking all these sorts of different courses, right? It's not like you're just taking medical school courses like in med school, but you're taking all these different courses. You have to study. You have to find time to do everything. My senior year of college doing chemistry was more difficult than anything in med school. Relatively speaking, I don't know. Med school I found it to be, not that it was easy, but it was just different. It was different. I was dedicated, and you're there. You're totally present. So those first 2 years of med school were great. And then the second 2 years of med school, you do your clinical rotations. And I started I think my first was family medicine. And then I thought I wanted to do surgery for some reason. The reason is because I really liked anatomy and did really well with anatomy. And so I was like, I'm good at anatomy. I'll be a great surgeon. I'll enjoy surgery. And I was completely wrong. I hated surgery. I was exposed to ENT surgery, plastic surgery, and just general surgery. I absolutely hated it. I didn't realize how boring surgery was. And it's boring. and I still feel that way. No offense to any surgeons listening to this. Here's the thing about being a surgeon, and this is good advice that I heard and I still pass it along. If you're trying to decide what specialty to go into, if you're considering surgery, and if you can imagine doing something else, then you should not do surgery because you will hate it. But if surgery is the only thing you can possibly do, then you should do surgery. That's the mentality. You should only go into surgery if you feel like you were born to do it, or if you feel like I cannot possibly imagine doing anything else. It's a peculiar breed. Okay, I'm sorry. I make fun of surgeons a lot, and it's in good fun. I work with surgeons all the time. I work with cardiothoracic surgeons, ENT. I work with tons of surgeons. Right? They're my friends, and I have a lot of respect for what surgeons do, and I'm glad they do it because I don't like it. It's mechanical. You're a plumber. You're an engineer. You're just hooking things together. And I'm not trying to denigrate what they do, but it's very labor intensive. It's very physical. You're doing things with your hands constantly, and I found that just kind of repetitive and boring. And a lot of the residents were miserable. I knew it was not for me. And then my med school, fortunately, not all med schools have a required anesthesia rotation, but mine did. So I was required to do like 2 or 3 weeks of anesthesia. And about a week into it, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to be an anesthesiologist. I was pretty sure. Here's the reason. So you're doing stuff with your hands. You're doing procedures as an anesthesiologist. So you have that aspect. But you also have a really deep understanding of human physiology, how the heart works, how the lungs work, how blood vessels work. And then not only do you have a good idea of like all of that, what we call like hemodynamics and how it pertains to surgery, but then you're half of a pharmacist. You understand pharmacology and the drugs super well. And then you are the only doctor who picks up a drug, knows how it works, and administers it to a patient and sees the effect. No other physician does something like that. So I loved how it was high acuity. You were in the moment, you were taking care of patients, and you had this great understanding of how the human body worked, and you were using it in real time. It wasn't just theoretical. And I loved that. Another reason I loved anesthesiology was the culture. I could tell the types of personalities that went into anesthesiology. That was my kind of personality. But typically, it's not always like this, but typically anesthesiologists are fairly laid back, fairly calm, right? Good humored. And I could this is my crowd. This is where I belong. Now I had exposure to other medical fields that I did enjoy and others that I also hated a lot. Working in clinic is so exhausting. It's so soul-sucking. Being a family medicine person, provider, or physician, a lot of respect to you because that is a hard job. The reason that's a hard job is you don't have enough time to see enough patients, possibly, depending on where you work. And it's draining, just that repetition of being in a clinic and seeing the patients over and over and over again. I really disliked it, which it's... Right, it's unfair of me. Maybe I should have gone to family medicine. You're also less compensated. Same with psychiatry. Family medicine and psychiatry are the least compensated of like all of physicians, and it's like one of the most important. Right, both of those are so extremely important for preventative care for people's physical and mental health. If we invested more, if we paid those providers more and invested more in that, think how many problems it would solve in our society. Anyway, so I copped out and did anesthesia and didn't do jobs. You work in a clinic. As an anesthesiologist, you don't have to work in a clinic and you don't have to be a surgeon. It was great. It was a great combo for me. And then other things that I disliked, I did not like OB. I don't know what, I liked the physiology and stuff and there was nothing wrong with like being around birth or anything like that. But I don't know, something about the culture of OB. I don't know. Something rubbed me the wrong way. What else was I exposed to? Lots of different medical fields. You're required, and then you can also do elective. I really liked internal medicine. So internal medicine is like the residency that you do that leads to many other types of doctors. Like if someone's a cardiologist or a GI doc or a nephrologist or a pulmonologist, they all did internal medicine residency first, and then they did a fellowship in those things. So internal medicine is the gateway to other fellowships, to other types of doctors. And I definitely liked internal medicine. I would have done internal medicine if I didn't do anesthesiology. I like the cerebral aspect out of it, thinking, diagnosing, things like that. But I found it, again, a little boring, a little kind of quaint, a little too slow for me, too much documentation, not enough time spending with the patient. Again, I swear, I'm going to annoy so many people that are listening to this. that do these things. So I'm sorry if I'm mischaracterizing or creating a bit of a caricature of these fields, and I am, and I hope I'm doing it in good humor. Anyway, so anesthesia was for me, so I knew I was going to do that. Now, but I don't just do anesthesia, right? I'm a critical care doctor. So did I want to do critical care when I was a med student? No, not really. In fact, I didn't even do a single ICU rotation as a medical student. It was something that was very intimidating, and I was like, that's scary. Those are sick patients. I don't get any of that. So I didn't even think about it when I was in med school. So I went to anesthesia residency. Very excited to do it. Now, this is what intern year is. So when an intern is someone who's graduated from medical school and is in their first year before residency. It's like this transition period. A lot of times it's referred to as residency, but it's an internship, and it's 1 year. It's like you are a doctor. You're a doctor in training, and you're not quite a resident. You don't have that experience, so you're an intern. The first day of my intern year is the only time I regretted going into medicine. I thought it was the only time, and never before and never since, that very first day that I was like, I don't think I can do this. And it was because I was brand new in an emergency bay and rotating in a trauma unit, the trauma bay in an emergency department at a level 1 trauma hospital. It was intense. I had no idea what I was doing, and it was rough. It was rough. It was an extremely stressful day. The next day I woke up and came to work, and I loved it. So it didn't last very long. And I loved residency. Anesthesia residency, I absolutely loved it. I knew it was the right thing for me. Fortunately, not everybody, not everybody loves what they pick. But I loved getting to know all of the details of anesthesia and airway management and getting to know all these different surgeries. And I thrived. I absolutely loved it. Liver transplants, heart transplants, lung transplants, working, at a VA, working in a trauma hospital, just vascular surgeries, brain surgery, orthopedic surgery. I loved it all. Peripheral nerve blocks. I just ate it up. I loved the field of anesthesia, and I still do, and I still enjoy it to this day. I still enjoy showing up and working in the OR. Absolutely love it. Residency is hard. There's no doubt about that. I worked, anywhere from 50 to 80 hours a week, and that's way better than what it used to be, right? There's now like laws that you can't overwork residents more than 80 hours a week. So I worked anywhere from 50 to 80 hours a week. And you get paid as a resident. You don't get paid very much, but actually, in grand scheme of things, it's not bad. You can live. Many people would die to, have that salary. But, if you live in an expensive city and all those things, I went into credit card debt. I also had my student loans debt. I couldn't pay any of my student loans. I couldn't afford it. So I had to go into forbearance of my student loans for all of my residency. And the residency was 4 years. So just piling on more debt. But it's like, it's not like I was starving. I had a roof over my head, and I was going to be a doctor eventually, a well-compensated physician. So this whole thing, I noticed this on social media, this trend, residents complaining about their salaries, and I think it's fine, and I think residents should be paid more, but you're not in the same station as someone else who makes that much money or less, because you are going to make more money. Like, I don't buy it. It kind of bothers me when I see posts like that. Anyway, I digress. So now I worked a lot in the neurological ICU and in cardiac ICU as a resident. And that's when I got exposed to ICU care. And I was like, I kind of like this, but I kind of don't. It's kind of miserable. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And so it takes a fellowship to do critical care. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. But you know what? I knew it. I knew I would. It was itching in the back of my mind. It was like, no, you like this. And also you like helping people that are approaching death, and you like helping them die appropriately. If they're going to die, you like helping them get better if they're going to get better. And I also liked dealing with patient families and helping them go through that dying process. I enjoyed it. And I enjoy the really critical aspect of critical care. I enjoy resuscitating patients. I knew that I did, even though it was exhausting. And so I signed up for fellowship, and off I went to fellowship again. And so I did a 1-year critical care fellowship, and it was straight critical care. I did no anesthesia. I was a fellow that just did all sorts of critical care, cardiac, neuro, medical ICU, all different sorts. I ran so many codes and did just so much. I loved fellowship also. Loved it. Such good friends. Just an absolute amazing experience. But again, fellowship was hard. Residency is hard. And you have to find times. You have to know how to decompress. And so that kind of brings me, and then I started practice, and I'm still fairly young and early in my career, but now I do both anesthesiology and critical care, and it is exhausting. I do love it, and I still do love it, but it's a very tiring job. I typically do like 2 weeks of anesthesia in the OR, and then I do a week in the ICU. I mostly work in the cardiac ICU with ECMO and really sick cardiac patients that have heart surgery and patients that aren't sick and do well. And then I also attend in a medical surgical ICU where I take care of liver cirrhotic patients, liver transplants, bone marrow transplants, which are very, very sick patient population. I have in collaboration with NPs and PAs and nurses and socialists and PTs and OTs and speech therapists and all that, have helped many, many people get better and leave the hospital. And I've also seen many, many people die and led many codes and resuscitated many people. So that's kind of my job. That's kind of my journey to where I'm at now. I do not regret it. I'm happy I'm here. I do not regret going into debt. And I don't regret the path that I chose. And the things that I enjoyed, that aside from medicine, I can still enjoy. As I said, I still enjoy writing. I love reading. I read books all the time. I'm obsessed with fantasy and sci-fi and nonfiction. Speaking of which, why don't we switch to giving an analysis of a book? All right, I'm going to be talking about Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber. I love this book. If you may have noticed, I've mentioned this a lot, quite often on my TikTok channels. This is like a highly, highly recommended book. Probably one of my favorite nonfiction books that I read in 2021. So to sum up this book in one sentence, it's modern capitalism is rebranded feudalism. And there is so much to say about this book. I would pick this up quickly, read it soon, because it will completely change your worldview about employment, society, and capitalism. Graeber takes his theory, talking about what bullshit jobs are. He lays it out really well, and then he expands it into a theory about the very fabric of our economy and how the corporate world has been fashioned into a modern day feudal state where managerial lords preside over a vast and bloated private bureaucracy that has one aim: slowing down efficiency and extracting as much capital from the process as possible, and then concentrating that wealth. First, like the meat of this book, like the beginning of it, what are bullshit jobs? With a lot of like wit and like eloquence, Graeber comes up with an entire taxonomy of bullshit jobs that literally anyone who has ever worked in the market of comedy will readily relate to. I guarantee you're gonna love this. He has 5 designations of what bullshit jobs are. The flunkies, who are paid to make their superiors look good. These take the otherwise rebellious and give them something to do to occupy their time. Flunkies are like the doorman, the cold callers, they're assistants to stockbrokers, when stockbrokers don't really need one. It's all about making the boss look good, and they likely do 90% of their boss's job while their boss is, scrolling on social media all day or something like that. There are the goons, trying to get people to do things that they don't want to do, like a telemarketer. There's the duct tapers. They're hired to fix what someone else in the company screwed up or doesn't know how to do. There's the box tickers. This is self-explanatory. And then there are the task masters. These are the mid-level managerial positions who do nothing but manage people who don't need to be managed at all. All of these jobs are bullshit jobs. And how he really defines it is if these jobs were to vanish right now, no one, not even those employed in those jobs, would miss those jobs. This is he makes a distinguishing factor between bullshit jobs and shit jobs. Shit jobs are 100% essential. They just aren't very glamorous and are traditionally laborious, like service jobs. And here's the crazy thing. Bullshit jobs are everywhere. They go unrecognized and represent a reverse in traditional thinking, that the private sector, quote, free markets are incredibly inefficient and are actually bloated bureaucracies. Through dozens and dozens of first-hand accounts, Graeber shares and analyzes people being very honest about their bullshit jobs. He suggests that domination over people is a form of like spiritual violence. The current job structure we live in is not natural and it's not necessary. Graeber argues that we also easily could all have 15-hour work weeks and possibly be even more efficient and be able to pursue other things that actually make us feel like human beings. One should never underestimate an institution's motivation to preserve itself. Through collusion with the government, Wall Street has become the de facto taskmasters, setting up the feared government bureaucracy that has been the boogeyman since the 1980s. The bureaucracy that everyone fears is actually the corporatocracy and not really the government. Not only are these masters in power, but they're also in domination over our market society. Ingrained in each of us since school is the need to be on time, obey, don't talk back, regardless of how absurd our own critical thinking has discovered how things are. Some insist that the free market would never create jobs that aren't necessary, and that it's just the lowly employees that don't understand their tiny jobs in the enormous complex of a conglomeration. They say it is the breaking of many tasks apart that make it all appear bullshit. The truth is, market solutions not only create inefficiencies, but they are rewarded by inefficiencies. For example, when a company has to pay out a lawsuit, it is greatly in their interest to take their time. The longer a process takes, the more wealth could be extracted, multiplied by a factor of how many subcontractors can get involved. The result is soul-sucking tedium for the little person, hollowing infrastructure, and wealth concentration at the top. And so what we have is not really capitalism, but an enormous rent-seeking institution that rewards the inefficiencies and delays, which destroys the final product with total disregard for the employee and their, adorable attempts to have a living wage or to have healthcare, not wealth care. There is a clear inverse relationship between job usefulness and pay. Most jobs that add value, like teachers, artists, journalists, they get terrible pay. Those that work in the financial sector contribute the absolute least to society. And herein, we get a fleshing out of an important dynamic: moral envy and resentment. Take the outcry for teachers demanding collective bargaining for benefits. The opposing view is that, hey, they chose that job. They should deal with it. They can go get a job somewhere else. It's as if they're saying, if you choose a job that actually adds value to society, that should be a reward in and of itself. How dare you demand a living wage and benefits? There is a sort of perverse indignation when those in virtuous sectors also want decent pay. There was a time when labor was seen as the means of production and power. And yeah, I know I sound like a Marxist commie trash talker here, but capital now has all the power, and it dictates the market and the value. In the labor value theory, one paid for something the amount of labor it would have taken the consumer to produce that thing. This idea is completely foreign because capitalists have completely decoupled price from product. Capital dictates everything. There was a huge shift from turning labor from the producing power into the consumers. Labor was hollowed out of its power and given just enough money to consume, but nothing more. So now we live in this weird sadomasochistic dynamic where suffering at a job is supposed to be some sort of badge of honor. And if you don't suffer like the rest of us, then you're just the undeserving poor. They say, like, how dare you demand entitlement when you haven't suffered like me for 10 years in a bullshit job where I'm dehumanized daily by my bullshit mid-level manager. Graeber argues that this is why we have the political landscape that we have today. Here's the ecosystem he kind of lays out. There are those struggling without work who resent the employed. There's the employed that are encouraged to resent the poor and unemployed as freeloaders. Those trapped in bullshit jobs resent those that do productive or virtuous labor. Those that do productive or virtuous labor resent those that have monopolized capital at the top, who are often referred to as the liberal elite. All are united in their hatred of the political class. And the elite class, part of the political class, they're fine with all this hatred, and they love culture wars because that's just convenient. It's all a grand distraction from their own corruption and their inept policymaking. The white working class hates the liberal intelligentsia, on average. Why? It's because the liberal elite are the gatekeepers to the professional class and higher paying jobs. The white poor can often imagine themselves being rich, but not having access to the ivory tower jobs of the liberal elite. So the rich are revered and often encouraged to obtain their wealth by unscrupulous means as long as it sticks it to the liberal class, who, quite accurately, has shut off a lot of people to the professional class. If you want to make money, there are ways to do this. If you want to pursue arts, charity, journalism, etc., and make actual money at it, it is extremely difficult to do it without existing social capital, wealth, or social networks. The liberal elites have placed a social lock on making money through valuable work. The white working class focuses on resentment towards intellectuals. Immigrant families can also have distrust of liberal policymaking because they see education, which is a liberal bastion, as the only way of social mobility. For this reason, the white working class sees the immigrant class as in collusion with the liberal elite. And this is one reason why the military is so sacrosanct to the white working class. The children of the white working class who are shut off from the liberal professional class can obtain a job that has social value with job benefits. The military is a haven for frustrated altruists without a college degree. Graeber ends his discussion with a little bit about tech, talking a little bit about tech taking over jobs, and he brings up a fair point. Why doesn't anyone talk about the very feasible phenomenon of tech taking over the financial sector? It could happen if we allowed it. It would put a lot of rich people out of work, I guess. Graeber also argues that universal basic income, UBI, would do the exact opposite of growing the government. It would actually streamline the government and eliminate bullshit positions and would no longer be needed. UBI would give workers the power to quit their bullshit jobs if they wanted to. Graeber is a self-professed anarchist, and there's obviously a lot of Marxist principles in this book. I'm not gonna lie and deny that. But even if you're against these ideas, and I'm no Marxist, you will learn a lot from this book. I highly, highly recommend it. All right. Anyway, enough of my commie nonsense, right? Let's answer some questions from TikTok. Let's see. This is from TikTok user Manch Godwa. This is their question. Friend was in an overcrowded ER hallway last night. He now knows when all the female patients' periods are due, who is suicidal and why, etc. Is this a HIPAA violation? So this is definitely a thing. So crowded hospitals, particularly emergency departments, patients sometimes have to be parked in the hallway, that are a little more stable and don't need continuous monitoring. And obviously, patients are going to overhear things about other patients. We know this happens, and I would agree that yes, it is a HIPAA violation. So why is this a thing that is happening? Well, many people, particularly in the emergency department, go there because of that's the only care that they know how to get. Maybe they're uninsured or underinsured, and they go there for things that they don't need to go to the emergency department for, but they don't have any other options. So that's one reason why they're crowded. So there's definitely like a root cause of this. This wasn't just this hospital, I guarantee you. I've seen this many, many times at many different hospitals. People are obviously, hearing things about other patients that they shouldn't hear. And it is a definite systems issues that requires a lot of thought to talk more about. All right, next question from TikTok is from user Jane Leocn. Janelle Ocn. This person asks, what? My 21-year-old daughter had her tonsils removed yesterday. How do you provide an airway during throat surgeries? So it depends. When this is an ENT surgery, right? And ENTs are surgeons, and they do amazing operations, by the way. I do a lot of anesthetics for ENT surgeries, and they're really some of my favorite types of surgeons, and the ones I work with are particularly awesome. Really incredible surgeries that go way beyond just a tonsillectomy. But anyway, so I always talk to the ENT surgeon, like, what kind of airway do you want? Because they have something in mind, and we can put a breathing tube through the mouth. We can put it through the nose as well. We can also do a tracheostomy for the surgery. So it depends on where they're working and where they need room. So a tonsillectomy, it depends on what the surgeon wants, but oftentimes they can do it with an endotracheal tube going through the mouth. They just move it around. We can do it through the nose and go into the trachea as well, and that would free up the airway completely. So just honestly, it depends on the surgeon, depends on what they're used to, what they want. There are many, many things we can do, many different types of airways, many different types of breathing tubes as well. Okay, I got time for one more question from TikTok. This user's name is _CoralH, and it is, can you talk about critical illness myopathy? What causes it? So critical illness myopathy is where someone is critically ill for a while in the ICU, and myopathy is like, they have muscle weakness, or a neuromyopathy where they have neuromuscular junction weakness, where the nerve meets the muscle and you have weakness and you're deconditioned, and that can last a long time. It can last weeks, months. It can last longer than that. We don't really know. And this can happen from, if you just lay in bed for a while, you get deconditioned, and that neuromuscular junction can atrophy. And then the medications we give can also cause problems, particularly paralytics. We know that having someone on long-term paralytic drips, it can mess up with this neuromuscular junction, and it can make people have neuropathies and myopathies as well. I don't know if we fully understand this, but I mean, if you are constantly, to me, it's common sense. If you're constantly inhibiting a physiological pathway, it's going to atrophy in a certain way, and it's going to be difficult to get that back up when someone's, getting better. So this is definitely a known consequence of ICU care. And it's kind of part of the umbrella of the disease called post-intensive care syndrome, PICS, which is a physical and emotional and psychological disorder that can happen after, when someone's recovered, where they can be depressed, have anxiety, have PTSD, they can have weakness, they can have chronic pain, and it's all under this umbrella of PICS, which is kind of an emerging diagnosis. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening to the end if you have. Let me know, give me feedback if you like the structure of what I do. You can email me at icudrecmo@gmail.com, icudrecmo, ECMO @gmail.com. Ask me questions there. You can reach out on TikTok. My handle is ICUDoctor. On Instagram, it's ICUDoctor TikTok. Let me know what you like, and thank you for joining me. Thank you.